Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Ah! Just let that run in the background just a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the business point of this college football season. We're already at the halfway point. It's time to find out who are the contenders and who are the pretenders. This is Separation Saturday as we're going to start eliminating teams from the college football playoffs. Because what we've seen so far this season is a lot of inconsistency, a lot of teams not playing great one weekend and poorly the next weekend. We have to start now trying to figure out who are going to be the 12 teams that make the college football playoffs. So, ladies and gentlemen, as the sounds of the legendary Jimi Hendrix flow through my veins, we got 6 great games to break down in what we are deeming Separation Saturday. Folks, let's get to the recap of last week because when you look at these numbers, we stand on what our record says we are week in and week out. We don't sugarcoat it, we don't hide, we don't fudge it. Last week, we went 5-6, down 1.6 units on the week. Ladies and gentlemen, we had the Florida versus Tennessee game, absolutely handicapped perfectly. I will not backtrack on that. Go back and listen to it last week. What we didn't think at any point was that spread was not going to be in doubt. Tennessee was not covering 15 and a half. That's where we gave it out to our clients. That cover was never in doubt. We also had Florida on the money line for that 1.6 units. If Florida just does the smart football thing in the first half, the first time they had an opportunity to put points on the board, 4th and 1, Billy Napier, Sunbelt Billy, goes for it on 4th down, runs basically a wide receiver sweep against a team that can absolutely pursue to the ball when we're talking about going east and west. Never had a chance to get there. You kick the field goal there, Billy. You put points on the board and you put doubt into that crowd, into that opposing head coach there. Second time, and this is right before the half. The Florida Gators, go situation. Graham Mertz, who is not a physical quarterback whatsoever, that's why you recruited DJ Lagway to run the Tim Tebow package. You put Lagway in to run that play. Mertz fumbles the ball, you get no points. The Florida Gators absolutely dominated that first half, but didn't win on the scoreboard. And that's the most important thing. Folks, I will stand behind getting the analysis right each and every week because the more times we can get the analysis right, the more times we can get the game script right, we're going to be profitable week in and week out. Ladies and gentlemen, on the season, our record sits at 72, 45, and 1. That is still 62%. We are still up 19 units on the season. There's not a handicapper in the world that wouldn't take those kind of numbers. But to quote one of my great mentors, Bill Belichick, we're not worrying about last week anymore. We're not talking about last week anymore. We are now on to Cincinnati. And speaking of Cincinnati, we'll get to the Bearcats here in just a moment. But we get to our first game breakdown of the weekend. And that is the UNLV Running Rebels a team that we have absolutely loved all season long, off to a fantastic start early on in the season. They will be traveling to Corvallis to take on the Oregon State Beavers. Folks, this game is interesting. And to quote my good friends Matlock and Julie Balls, I'll talk about them a little bit later. We like interesting around these parts. So let's get into this matchup. Let's start with the UNLV offense versus that Oregon State defense. UNLV comes into this ball game with an adjusted, and folks, when I give out these numbers, it's our adjusted points per game, not what you're going to look up and see on one of these reference sites. We use a different way of calculating what a team's points per game is. So when I give that out for any stat, it's our adjusted numbers, not what you're going to be able to just look up if you're seeing a difference. That's why. Okay, so UNLV comes in averaging 37 points per game, while this Oregon State defense allows 31 points per game. The UNLV offense has been more productive, which will put pressure on this Oregon State team to tighten up defensively. Looking at the passing breakdown, UNLV is averaging 169 passing yards per game, which compares to the Oregon State defense, and what they're allowing is 170 yards per game. So expect that to be extremely balanced there. So UNLV may not be able to exploit this Oregon State secondary significantly. Keep that in mind. The UNLV rushing attack has been extremely strong so far this season, averaging 233 yards rushing per game. My goodness. While the Oregon State defense has allowed a healthy 230 yards rushing per game. This is a clear area where UNLV can dominate, as their ground game could exploit that Oregon State weakness in the rush defense. Third down conversions. UNLV is converting 35% on their third downs, which is below average, while the Oregon State defense is allowing a high of 43.6% on third down conversions by their opponents. If UNLV can improve on third down efficiency in this ball game, they could control time of possession, keep drives alive, and get into the scoring area here. As far as the edge goes, UNLV's offense, particularly when we're talking about the running game, has a significant advantage over Oregon State's defense, which has struggled to stop the run. UNLV's ability to establish the run could be their key to success in this contest. Let's flip it over and look at the Oregon State offense versus that UNLV defense. Oregon State comes into this contest averaging 24.5 points per game, while the UNLV defense is allowing 26.9 points per game. Oregon State will need to perform better than their season's average if they want to keep up with that UNLV offense. Looking at the passing game, Oregon State's averaging a modest 160 yards passing per game. Going up against a UNLV defense that will give up some yards in the passing game. 266 yards per game is what this UNLV secondary is allowing. There is an opportunity here for Oregon State to exploit, as that UNLV passing defense is vulnerable. I would expect Oregon State to put the ball in the air quite often in this ball game, especially early in the ball game. Test that secondary. See if you can't hit some of those chunk plays. Now, let's take a look at the run game here. As far as the Oregon State rushing attack, it is more than solid, averaging 220 yards rushing per game. But that UNLV defense is decent against the run. Matter of fact, they're probably better than decent against the run, allowing only 124 yards per game rushing to their opponents. Oregon State will rely on their ground game, but they will face a much more stout UNLV rush defense in this contest on Saturday. Third down conversion. Oregon State is converting an impressive 52.5% on third down, while UNLV's defense is allowing 41%. Big advantage here for Oregon State, and they will need to maintain that advantage to sustain drives, keep that UNLV offense off the field, and wear down that defense. The edge, Oregon State could potentially capitalize on that weak UNLV pass defense, but they will face a stiff challenge with that UNLV rushing defense. Their ability to convert on third downs gives them a chance to extend drives, keeping this game close. The head coaching comparison. This is something new that we're going to be doing from here on out the rest of the season. UNLV head coach Barry Odom has coached in 19 games since 2023. And folks, that's where we're going to start the tracker here. So from the beginning of last season up until where we are at this very moment. Barry Odom he has won 14 games with a win percentage of 73.7%. He's been involved in 7 one-score games, winning 4, losing 3. That's a win percentage of 57%. And against quality opponents, he struggled a little bit, going 4-5 in the last year and a half. Trent Bray, head coach for Oregon State. His first year has only coached 6 games with a 4-2 record in one-score games. Bray is 1-1. He's faced one quality opponent, and he's lost that contest so far this season. We're going to give an edge to Barry Odom in experience and a better track record in close games, giving him a slight edge in the coaching matchup. However, Bray's limited experience means he's somewhat unproven in these crucial situations. Final conclusion for this ball game: UNLV has a clear edge in the running game, which could be the decisive advantage here against an Oregon State defense that has struggled to stop the run. However, if Oregon State is able to exploit that UNLV weak pass defense, could keep them competitive. Oregon State can control the clock and convert on third downs. They have a chance to pull off the win, but that UNLV ground game and overall offensive effectiveness makes them the favorite in this contest. Our next contest, we will travel to beautiful, and I do mean beautiful, Louisville, Kentucky. And we have a very interesting matchup here in the Atlantic Coast Conference. And we love interesting around these parts. Let's take a look at this matchup, and let's start with the visiting Miami Hurricane offense, as this unit has been absolutely nuclear against defenses so far this season. The Hurricanes are averaging an impressive 44.4 points per game, while that Louisville defense not giving up a lot of points, 18.1 points per game. Miami offense is clearly explosive and efficient, and Louisville will have their hands full trying to contain those Miami Hurricanes. Miami's passing game is averaging a massive 415 passing yards per game, compared to the Louisville defense, which is allowing 261 yards per game through the air. Miami's passing attack is a major strength, and Louisville will need to tighten up the coverage to prevent big plays, which Miami has absolutely thrived on so far early on in the season. The Miami ground attack has been solid this year, averaging 164 yards rushing per game, while the Louisville defense has been extremely stout against the run. Only 102 yards per game is what this Louisville stop unit on the ground is giving up. That Louisville Cardinal defense is absolutely strong against the run, so they could limit the Miami rushing success in this contest. Third down conversions. Miami is converting an incredible almost 59% on third downs this season, while Louisville only allowing 31% on third downs. Miami's dominance on third downs gives them a significant advantage in sustaining drives and not having to settle for field goals or long range field goals, getting closer to that end zone. And we know if you're converting 44 points per game, you're scoring a high efficiency rate on your drives ending with touchdowns. Let's take a look at that Louisville Cardinal offense versus this Hurricane defense. Louisville scoring 31.1 points per game, while the Miami defense is only allowing 20.3 points per game. Louisville's offense has been effective, but it will be tested by this Miami Hurricane defense, which has been extremely solid so far this season. Louisville loves to throw the ball early and often, and they will probably look to do so again in this contest. The Cardinals averaging 289 passing yards per game, going up against a Miami passing attack that gives up only 203 yards passing per game. Folks, that is almost an 80-yard difference there. Whoever wins that battle could be the difference in winning this contest. The Miami secondary has been extremely strong, so Louisville may struggle to move the ball effectively through the air. So let's turn to the ground game and see how this matches up. Louisville comes in averaging 155 rushing yards per game, while Miami is allowing only 115 yards per game. Both teams are solid in this area, but we're going to give a slight edge to the Miami defense in containing the run. Third down conversions. This is very important here, folks. Put a circle around this. Louisville converting 40% on third downs, while the Miami defense is allowing their opponents to only convert at 30%. Miami's ability to get stops on third down could be a key factor in this matchup. Edge to the Miami defense as they hold the advantage here, particularly in the secondary and on third downs. Louisville would need to find a balance on their offense to avoid those obvious passing situations. Let's take a look at the head coaching comparison here. Mario Cristobal since 2023, started last year, as I mentioned. 18 games, 13 wins, win rate of 72%. In one-score games, Mario is 4-3. That's a 57% win percentage in those contests. And against quality opponents, Cristobal is 5-4. Jeff Brom, head coach for Louisville, 19 games in the last year and a half, winning 14, win rate of 74%. He has been solid in one-score games with a 6-3 record against quality opponents. He is also 5-4. Both coaches have similar records and experience over the last year and a half, with Brom a slight edge in one-score games. However, Cristobal's coaching style emphasizes physicality. Remember, folks, Mario Cristobal, two-time national champion offensive lineman at the University of Miami, which gives him a slight edge in this contest. Final thoughts on this ball game. Miami has a significant advantage in terms of offensive explosiveness, especially in the passing game. Louisville's defense will need to step up, particularly in the secondary, to keep this game close, as Miami's ability to convert on third downs and create big plays through the air will be the key to their success. If Louisville can establish the run and force Miami into long drives, they may be able to pull off the upset, but they'll face an uphill battle going up against that high-powered Miami offense. Folks, let's get to our next game. The Arizona State Sun Devils traveling to the Queen City to take on the Cincinnati Bearcats. Folks, I got to be honest with you. This is one of my favorite games of the weekend from a viewing standpoint because I want to learn a lot about these two teams, and this matchup is going to provide me with that opportunity. Let's start with the Arizona State offense going up against that Bearcat defense. Arizona State is putting up 30 and a half points per game, while the Bearcats are only allowing 20 points per game. That Cincinnati defense has a slight edge in this ball game, but Arizona State has the potential to put up points if they can exploit weak areas in Cincinnati's defense. Let's take a look at the passing breakdown here. Arizona State is averaging 207 yards passing per game. They're facing a Bearcat defense that is allowing 231 passing yards per game. While the Arizona State passing attack isn't their strongest weapon, that Cincinnati vulnerability in defending the pass could provide opportunities for the Sun Devils to move the ball through the air. Remember that while this game is being played, Arizona State's ground game is extremely strong, with 206 yards rushing per game. Going up against the Cincinnati defense that is allowing 151 yards per game. Arizona State will likely lean on their run game as they have a clear advantage in this department. Let's take a look at the third down conversion. Arizona State converts 49% on third downs, while Cincinnati's defense is allowing their opponents to convert at a rate of 42% on third downs. Arizona State ability to keep drives alive on third downs will be crucial for them to control this game. We're going to give a slight edge to that Arizona State offense against the Cincinnati Bearcat defense, especially in the run game and on third down conversions. If, and I do mean if, Arizona State is able to establish the run early and can hit a few big passing plays, they should have success moving the ball on this Bearcat defense. Let's take a look at Cincinnati's offense versus that Arizona State defense. Cincinnati comes into this contest averaging right at 39.6 points per game, while this Arizona State defense is allowing 23.7 points per game. The Cincinnati offense has been explosive, and they will be looking to capitalize on that Arizona State defense, which does struggle at times. Let's look at the passing breakdown. Cincinnati is averaging a whopping 327 yards passing per game, while Arizona State's defense is allowing 209 yards passing per game. Cincinnati has a clear advantage in the passing game, and they will look to exploit that Arizona State secondary in this ball game. Looking at the ground game, Cincinnati's ground attack averaging 156 yards rushing per game, while Arizona State is only allowing 105 yards rushing per game. Arizona rush defense is strong, but Cincinnati is bringing in a well-balanced attack and will need to maintain some rushing presence to avoid becoming one-dimensional in this contest. Third down conversions. Cincinnati is converting 54% on third downs. Arizona State's defense is allowing their opponents to convert at 36%. Cincinnati's ability to convert on third downs gives them a huge advantage in maintaining long, sustaining drives. Folks, that's how you wear your opponent down early on in the ball game. If they can't get off the field, they're on the field for 8, 9, 10, 12 plays in a drive. You get into those defensive tackles' legs, you wear them out. That's huge in a ball game like this. Advantage on this side of the ball, we're going to give it to Cincinnati as they hold a significant advantage over that ASU defense, particularly through the air. Cincinnati's passing attack could be dominant if they can find rhythm early on in this contest. Let's take a look at the head coaching comparison here. Kenny Dillingham, head coach for Arizona State, since the start of last season, 18 contests, winning only 8 of those contests, 44% win rate. He's been competitive in close games, 5-4 record in one-score contest. And against quality opponents, his record stands at 3-8. Most of those losses came in his first year as the head coach of Arizona State. So we've seen some improvement there. In fact, let me see if I'm able to pull that up here. Unfortunately, I don't have that stat with me right now, but that's okay. Let's move on to Cincinnati head coach Scott Satterfield. Coach Satterfield has also coached 18 games there since the start of last year. Has only won 7 contests, giving him a win rate percentage of 39%. In one-score games, his teams have struggled with a 2-6 record in one-score games. He's also winless in 8 games against quality opponents. Going to give a slight advantage here in the coaching department to Kenny Dillingham, particularly if this game is close. But neither coach has been highly successful, especially against stronger teams. Both are looking for a signature win. Closing thoughts on this ball game. Both teams have advantages in different areas, but Cincinnati's explosive offense, particularly through the air, could be the deciding factor. Arizona State hopes will rely on controlling the game through their rushing attack, keeping that Cincinnati offense on the sidelines. If Cincinnati can execute their passing game and control third downs, they should come out on top. However, if Arizona State can dominate the ground game and limit big plays, they could pull off the upset in this contest. Our next featured contest, it is the Nebraska Cornhuskers taking on America's team, the Indiana Hoosiers. Folks, you've heard us repeat that slogan all podcast and all show long. We're going to continue to do that as long as Indiana continues to win ball games. Nebraska comes into this contest with a 5-1 record. The Indiana Hoosiers come into this contest with a 6-0 record. Indiana comes into this contest with a 6-0 record. Since Indiana, I'm looking at the wrong screen here. Indiana is also our number 3 ranked team in our latest ranking. Nebraska sits just outside of the top 25. Let's take a look at that Nebraska offense versus America's team and their stop unit on defense. Nebraska's offense is struggling. Folks, they're averaging 18 points per game and 323 yards of total offense. Their passing game, 226 yards per game, is somewhat functional, but that rushing attack, 97 yards per game on the ground, is extremely weak, which is limiting their offensive balance. Nebraska's biggest struggle is finishing drives. They're converting 31% of their drives are ending with points, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown. And when we look at their drives just ending with a touchdown, you're looking at 27% in that metric. Folks, that is not good. And their ability to convert on third downs is only 34%, ranking them low in effectiveness which they're 73rd in our metric in net. And as far as being explosive on offense, they're 91st in that category. Folks, let's talk about America's team on defense here. The Indiana defense, on the other hand, has been strong early on in this season. They are only allowing 15 points per game, holding opponents to just 4.6 yards per play. And they rank 6th in overall defense. Indiana is good at preventing scoring drives. 27% of their opponent's drives are ending with a field goal or a touchdown, which is bad news for a Nebraska inefficient offense. Indiana's pass defense has been solid, allowing 169 passing yards per game, which might frustrate Nebraska only consistent offensive part of their offense. Nebraska will need to work hard to break Indiana's defensive wall, especially on third down, where Indiana is allowing only 37.5% to their opponents on third down conversions. Folks, let's talk about America's team on offense. Kurt Cignetti, head coach there for Indiana, is doing a beautiful job. This Indiana offense, in contrast to that Nebraska offense, is explosive and efficient. They're averaging almost 41 points per game, 451 yards of total offense, which includes 277 passing yards, 173 rushing yards. This ranks them high in all of our metrics as they come in as the 6th overall ranked offense. And they're highly efficient on drives, averaging 4.3 points per drive. 66% of their drives are ending with a score. 57% of their drives are ending with a touchdown. Indiana's ability to convert on third downs, 47%. This is allowing them to produce 8.9 points per 100 yards. Now, this is going to be tough for Nebraska's offense to counter. So Nebraska is going to need their defense to step up and absolutely pitch. I'm not going to say a perfect game, but if they can throw 7 innings of strong shutout performance or giving up just a couple of runs, using a baseball term since we're in the MLB playoffs, that will be Nebraska's pathway to victory. This Nebraska stop unit has been absolutely beautiful. 15 points per game is what they're allowing. 285 yards of total offense. This team is 4th overall in defensive effectiveness, and they do well against the pass, only giving up 169 yards passing per game. Nebraska's ability to hold opponents to just 4.6 yards per play could help limit that Indiana high-powered offense. Nebraska's defense has been somewhat vulnerable, allowing 116 yards rushing per game. That could be Indiana's opportunity to exploit with their rushing offense that is averaging 173 yards rushing per game. Key for Indiana, don't give up on the run early on in this ball game. Don't become one-dimensional. You want to make sure that you're forcing Nebraska to defend the run and the pass on early downs throughout this contest. Let's take a look at the coaching comparison. Matt Rule, Nebraska head coach versus Kurt Cignetti. Matt Rule has struggled with Nebraska, posting a 55 win percentage, 10-8 since the start of last season. And he's been less effective in close games, only winning 25% of those contests, 2-6 in those contests. Same record as Ohio State's head coach Ryan Day against top 5 opponents. Whew. Matt Rule, you never want to be compared to Ryan Day when we're talking about winning close games. Now, Ryan Day's that record is against top 5 teams, but you get where I'm saying. You need to improve winning those close games. Curt Cignetti has been exceptional for Indiana. Over his last year and a half, he post a 17-1 record. Now, that includes his time at James Madison before becoming the head coach here at Indiana. Last year in the regular season at James Madison, 11-1. So, folks, this man can flat out coach, and if you give him talent, he'll win ball games for you. Take that to the bank, baby. Cignetti has thrived in close games. 83% win percentage in those contests. 6 contests, 5-1. He also has a strong winning percentage against quality opponents. Also 83%, 5-1. Compared to Matt Rule's 1-3 record against quality opponents. Only 25%. Nebraska, this is a quality opponent. This may be a close game. Who do you think we're giving the advantage to? America's head coach, America's team. The summary and final thoughts on this matchup. This matchup heavily favors Indiana due to their vastly superior offense and their strong defensive capabilities. Nebraska's only hope lies in their defense, holding up and forcing a low-scoring game. Otherwise, Indiana's efficient and explosive offense should dominate, especially if they're able to establish the run and convert on third down. Our last game before we get to our featured contest, and this is a very important contest in the Southeastern Conference. The Georgia Bulldogs coming to this contest 5-1 versus the undefeated 6-0 Texas Longhorns. Georgia off a closer than what the experts thought that game would be against Mississippi State last week, winning that contest 41-31. And ladies and gentlemen, let me say this. It wasn't that Mississippi State got a late score in that contest to make that score look respectable. Folks, this was a tight ball game from kickoff to the final whistle last week. So giving up 31 points to a Mississippi State team that was starting their backup quarterback. Folks, their backup quarterback, Van Buren, went for 20 for 37, 306 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 INT against this Georgia defense. Texas, coming off an absolutely dominant performance, especially on the defensive side of the ball, against a handicapped Oklahoma offense. But here's what we've seen so far in this season. Just because you are expected to win doesn't mean that you won. Hello, Alabama against Vanderbilt. Hello, Tennessee against Arkansas. Hello, Ole Miss against Ole Miss. We'll save that for another day. My goodness. Lane Kiffin, God bless. All right, let's get into this matchup. Let's take a look at the Southeastern Conference standings. And we're just talking about in-conference records right now. Texas A&M and Texas LSU all undefeated. A&M 3-0. Texas and LSU 2-0 in conference play. Georgia in conference 3-1. Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Alabama, and Tennessee all 2-1. Let's go ahead and just round out the rest of the conference records here for the Southeastern Conference. We're doing good on time. Missouri 1-1. Ole Miss 1-2. Oklahoma 1-2. Florida 1-2. South Carolina and Kentucky 1-3. Auburn and Mississippi State winless 0-3 in conference play right now. This matchup, and folks, I want to make sure that I'm heard clearly on this. This game is very important for the Georgia Bulldogs because you want to control your own fate as far as making the college football playoffs. Now, to Georgia's credit, they have a win over Clemson all the way back in the first week of the season. Struggled against Kentucky, winning that game on the road by 1 point. We know about the loss to Alabama. 31-13 against Auburn. It looked clunky, but you got the win. Same thing last weekend against Mississippi State, 41-31. The reason why I say this game is important for Georgia, you want to have that statement win on your resume. The Clemson win is going to be a good win. It's going to be a quality win. No question about that. You get this win on the road, and if you take care of business the rest of the year, or if you just happen to stumble against, let's say, an Ole Miss or Georgia, you still have that quality win over Texas for the committee to fall back on. That's why I said this is an important game for Georgia. And I will almost declare it as a must win because you really don't want to be in a conversation as a 2-loss team against every other team that's going to be competing for what we're going to call a wild card berth into the college football playoffs, because with 2 conference losses, you're not going to get into the SEC championship game, as we no longer have divisions in the Southeastern Conference. So you're not going to get into the Southeastern Conference championship game. You'll have 2 losses in conference. Your signature win, you're hoping that Clemson runs the table and gets to the ACC title game. Hope is not a strategy. Hope needs to be replaced by, let's go put this on our shoulders, play the best 60 minutes we've played since week 1, and come out of Austin with a win. This game is also important to Texas. Now, Texas, that win against Michigan is going to look less impressive as Michigan continues to stack up losses. Okay? That Oklahoma win is going to look far less impressive as Oklahoma will start to rack up more and more losses. By the time we get to the end of the season, folks, Oklahoma could be a 5-loss team. So that is not going to be the quality win as it looks right now. So looking at the rest of Texas' schedule, that game against Vandy next week could be a quality win. But your next quality win, you may have to wait to the end of the season for the renewal of Texas A&M. Texas needs this win just as much as Georgia needs it for the same reason. You don't want to give the committee any reason to have any doubt about you being in the college football playoffs. Let's get to it. The Georgia offense versus the Texas defense. Georgia's offense comes in averaging 36 points per game. while this Texas defense is only allowing 9.4 points per game, making Texas one of the toughest defenses Georgia will face this year. Georgia will need to maximize their scoring opportunities to break through in this contest. If they're going to break through, it's probably going to be through the passing game. Georgia comes in averaging 350 yards passing per game. And this Texas defense is strong against the pass so far this year, only giving up 128 yards passing per game. This Georgia passing attack will face heavy resistance, making it vital for their quarterback, Carson Beck, to perform at his highest level this season. Speaking of Carson Beck, let's talk about young Mr. Beck on the season. So far, 142 completions, 209 attempts, 1,118 yards, 15 touchdowns, 5 INTs. When we look at Carson Beck this year, his yards per attempt is down from where it was last year. Last year, with Lad McConkey, with Brock Bowers, he was averaging 9.5 yards per pass attempt. This year, it's down to 8.7. I'm not saying that's horrible, but we do see a little bit of regression there. Now, that's not saying that's all Carson's fault. It's just pointing out the difference in the numbers from this year to last year. Let's take a look at this Georgia Bulldog rushing attack. Folks, I've said Georgia has struggled to run the ball to the standards that we have come to know from the Georgia Bulldogs for the last 4 decades. Georgia has had a tailback be able to get yards on the ground since Herschel Walker was a freshman at the University of Georgia going back to the early 80s. Go back and look at the history of Georgia running backs. It is a who's who in college football. Robert Edwards, Sony Michel, Rodney Hampton, Nick Chubb. Folks, I can wax poetic as anybody in this business about Georgia tailbacks. This year, we are not seeing that from Georgia. Their leading rusher, Travis Etienne, the transfer from the University of Florida, 63 carries on the season, 335 yards, only 4 rushing touchdowns. Case closed, Your Honor. Georgia is gaining 144 yards rushing on the ground, while its Texas rush defense is allowing 122 yards on the ground. Making the run game fairly balanced, Georgia will need to establish some level of running game to prevent becoming one-dimensional and having that Texas defense square off on Carson Beck in this ball game. Let's take a look at Georgia on third downs. Georgia is converting 40% on third downs, but Texas is highly effective at stopping teams on third down, only allowing 27.5 third down conversions by their opponent. Georgia will need to find a way to extend drives and keep that Texas offense off the field. I'm going to give a slight edge to Texas in this matchup, especially in limiting Georgia's passing game. But if Georgia can be balanced and explosive, that should give them some opportunities to score in this contest. And they will need to score. Let's take a look at that Longhorn offense versus that Georgia stop unit on defense. Texas comes in averaging 40 points per game, while its Georgia defense is allowing 14 points per game. Texas has a high-powered offense, but this Georgia defense is still stout, making this a battle of strength versus strength. Texas is gaining 283 yards through the air, while this Georgia defense is allowing 202 yards passing per game. Texas passing game has the ability and the potential to push this Georgia defense. But Georgia has been solid in coverage. They haven't been great, but they have been solid. Texas is averaging 200 yards rushing per game. They're going up against their stiffest challenge, and that's no disrespect to Oklahoma, but this Georgia rushing defense is probably the most stout that they're going to face. That's because Oklahoma didn't have the offense to protect their defense and keep them off the field. Georgia may provide a different challenge here in this contest. With Georgia only allowing their opponents under 100 yards rushing per game, that means Texas may find it difficult to establish a strong ground game. If Texas can break through on the ground, this will open up some passing windows for quarterback Quinn Ewers back off of that oblique injury last week against Oklahoma. Looked okay, not great, but looked okay. Let's take a look at Quinn Ewers on the season. 78 completions, 108 attempts, 72% completion percentage, 890 yards passing per game, 8.2 yards per attempt. So a little bit less than what Beck is averaging. Got to remember, those games that he missed, Arch Manning was able to put up some really good passing yards against some lesser opponents. You would think Quinn Ewers could have put up similar numbers than that. 9 touchdowns, 3 INTs. Let's go back and look at that Oklahoma game last week just to see how Ewers did coming back in his first contest. Well, pretty sharp. 20 for 29, 199 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 INT. We can work with those numbers. On third downs, Texas is converting 53% on third downs, which is an impressive rate. This Georgia defense is only allowing their opponents to convert at 28%. So Texas will need to be efficient in maintaining drives. I'm going to give an edge, slight edge to Georgia's defense. You know what? Let me say how I wrote it. This Georgia defense is tough, but the Texas offense has enough balance and explosiveness to challenge them both in the run and passing game. You know what? I am going to give that slight edge to the Texas offense versus a very good, and I mean a very good Georgia defense. Let's take a look at the head coaching comparison. Since the start of the 2023 season, Kirby Smart, head coach for the Bulldogs, 19 contests, 19-2. I'm sorry, 17-2 in those 19 ball games. Almost a 90% win percentage. In close games, in the last year and a half, Kirby is 3-2 and has a impressive win rate of 82% against quality opponents. Still haven't been able to beat Bama often enough. Steve Sarkisian comes into this contest coaching just one additional game as he got to the college football playoffs last year. 20 games, he's 18-2 over the last year and a half. 90% win rate. In close games, he is also 3-2 and also has an impressive record against quality opponents. 82%. So these coaches know how to get it done against quality opponents and well enough in close games. The edge, well, both coaches are elite with nearly identical in terms of performance. This is a strategical matchup where each will look to outsmart the other in this contest. Final thoughts in this ball game. Keys for Georgia to win this ball game. They got to establish the run. Georgia needs to control the tempo and take the pressure off of Carson Beck in that passing game. Finding success on the ground will open up the play action opportunities for the Bulldogs if they can get that ground game going. For Texas, key to winning this ball game, it's got to be in the trenches. Texas must also establish the run game early to avoid becoming too reliant on their passing game against this stout Georgia front seven. Folks, I believe this game will be just as simple. Look at two categories and you should be able to tell who won the game. Look at the turnovers, and then which team had the most rushing attempts and yards. The winner of those three numbers, that should give you your winner of this ball game. And now it's time for the Matlock and Julie Vols Balls to the Wall Game of the Week. Always love giving a shout out to my good friends Matlock and Julie Vols as they host a fantastic show on 850 The Ticket down there in the beautiful Emerald Coast. You can find them each weekday, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Central Time. And you can stream the show at wearesportsradio.com. Also, give them a follow on Twitter at Matlock850. Absolutely love Matlock and Julie Vols, friends of the program. I actually have the pleasure of joining them every Wednesday and Friday at the 10 o'clock Central time slot for two segments there each and every week on Wednesday and Friday. Wednesday, we kind of recap what we saw. Friday, we're looking ahead to kind of project and predict what we may see this coming weekend. Fun show and a great group. So, Matlock, Julie Vols, let's get to that game of the week. And it is the Alabama Crimson Tide traveling to Knoxville to take on the Tennessee Volunteers. And folks, this is the third Saturday in October. A game that thankfully, with expansion, with realignment, this traditional game has remained in this weekend window. And for both teams, this is important for both teams. As both teams come into this ball game with identical records, both overall at 5-1, both teams already have a loss in conference. So this is a loser leave town matchup. And I can't overstate it enough. So let's give just a little bit of background on this history. These two campuses sit 310 miles apart. This is the 107th meeting between these two programs and bedrock programs of the Southeastern Conference. Alabama holds an all-time lead in this contest, series lead of 59, 39, and 7. Alabama had a win streak under Nick Saban of winning 15 consecutive games in this rivalry, going from 2007 to 2021. And we know that game ended in very spectacular fashion there in Rocky Top just a couple of years ago. So great job there ending that long streak. It's also worth mentioning that Tennessee had a long streak in this in this series as well, from 1995 to 2001, winning 7 straight in that contest. So this is a rivalry that has seen some notable runs by the winning team, winning some consecutive games here. As far as the coaching, some of the coaches that have coached in this fantastic rivalry, um, you're talking about some of the biggest names in this conference history. General Robert Nealon was 12-5-2 as the head coach of Tennessee going up against Alabama. Phil Fulmer, 11-4 against Alabama. Looking on the Alabama side, Coach Bryant, 16-7-2 against the Vols. And Nick Saban, a record in this rivalry that will never be touched, 16-1 against the Vols. But folks, we're not here to wax poetic about the history of this ball game. We got business at hand, and the winner of this game keeps their playoff hopes alive. The loser, you're drawing dead to an inside straight. Let's start with the visiting team, the Alabama Crimson Tide. We know that the Tide have not looked lovely over the last two and a half games. The second half against Georgia, the loss against Vandy 2 weeks ago, and that game against South Carolina. 2-point win. Just it wasn't clean for Alabama. Let's just go there. Okay, let's start with this Alabama offense versus the Tennessee defense. Alabama's offense has been explosive, 45 points per game. Tennessee's defense, however, is allowing just 10.5 points per game, making it one of the toughest units Alabama will face. This matchup will test Alabama's scoring efficiency. The passing game for Alabama is averaging 265 yards through the air. Tennessee's passing defense just allowing 160 yards passing per game. So this Alabama air attack will be challenged against really that strong Tennessee pass rush, helping out that secondary for Tennessee. The Alabama ground game has been one of their weapons and will need to be in this ball game. Alabama comes in averaging 211 rushing yards per game. Haven't quite seen that to the level the past couple of weeks, but we'll need to, like I said, see that this week. This Tennessee defense is allowing 102 rushing yards per game, indicating a strong defense that will likely focus on limiting that Alabama rushing attack. Alabama has been solid on third downs, converting at 46%, while this Tennessee defense is allowing a conversion rate of only 29%. Alabama would need to stay ahead of the chains to avoid long third down situations. I'm going to give a slight edge to that Tennessee defense. Providing Tennessee can get the pass rush going, because that Tennessee defense will face its steepest challenge yet, going up against a efficient and explosive Alabama's offense. You're definitely getting good on good here in this matchup. The same cannot be said on the flip side here. The Tennessee offense versus the Alabama defense. Tennessee is scoring 27 points per game. Folks, it has not looked beautiful in the last 2 weeks for the Volunteers. 23 points against Florida, 14 points against Tennessee, 15 points against Oklahoma. Oh. While this Alabama defense is still only allowing 15.6 points per game, Tennessee will need to maximize its scoring drives to keep pace with that Alabama offense. The Tennessee passing game, folks, go back and listen to last week. I gave a long breakdown of what Tennessee's not doing well enough to help out their young quarterback in Nico. They're only averaging 190 yards passing per game. This Alabama defense is allowing 190 yards passing. So the Tennessee passing game will need to be sharp if they're going to look to gain an advantage in this ball game. As far as the ground game, Tennessee's rushing attack is averaging behind Dylan Sampson 178 yards per game. But this Alabama defense is only allowing 137 yards per game. This shows the potential for Tennessee to move the ball on the ground, but it also highlights the challenge of that in this contest. Third down conversions, Tennessee is converting 43% on third downs, while Alabama's defense is holding their opponents to just 30%. Tennessee must also avoid third and long situations against this Alabama stingy defense. Going to give a slight edge to the Alabama defense with their elite rankings across the board, despite what we've seen over the past couple of weeks from a consistency standpoint. But when we look drive in and drive out, the Alabama defense has actually been pretty good. They'll need to be that and a little bit more in this contest, as they want to pose a tough challenge for this Tennessee less than explosive offense, especially on the passing side of the game. Folks, let's get into the head coaching comparison for this ball game. Kalen DeBoer, 1 year at his last year, I should say, at Washington, and just taking over at the University of Alabama. So since the start of the 2023 season, Kalen DeBoer's record is a remarkable 19-2. An excellent win percentage in one-score games, winning 91% of those one-score games. 87% versus quality opponents. Let's take a look at the Tennessee head coach, Josh Heupel. Heupel is also solid, but less experienced in one-score games, winning at a 75% win rate. That's not horrible. Like I said, that's actually really good in one-score games. 55% win percentage against quality opponents. Heupel's team will need to outperform its usual levels to upset DeBoer's Alabama Crimson Tide team. Going to give a coaching edge here to Kalen DeBoer, as he's been more successful, especially in close games, which gives Alabama a strategical advantage in this contest. Let's get to the keys for this ball game. And I'm going to give out several keys for both teams in this matchup. Alabama, you must protect the ball. This Tennessee defense has been very opportunistic. Limiting turnovers will prevent Tennessee from gaining momentum. We saw that last week in the second half against Florida, Alabama. You don't want to go down the same path that the Gators went down last week. The number 2 key for Alabama in this contest, they must establish the run. If Alabama can wear down that Tennessee front seven, they could control or will control the tempo of this game. The final key for Alabama is they must test that Tennessee secondary, and that starts with the big horses up front. That offensive line for Alabama needs to play to the standard, and they need to protect Jalen Milroe. Give him time to scan downfield and see if he can't find those windows at the second and third level for Alabama in this contest. Julie Balls. Let's take a look at the keys for your Tennessee Volunteers. The first key for Tennessee in this contest, they must limit Alabama's big plays. Tennessee needs to control Alabama's explosive offense and force them into long, sustaining drives. What your hope is that Alabama will make a mistake, whether it's a penalty or something, to where they're not getting the touchdown, they're getting maybe a field goal attempt in this contest. You want to make sure you stay connected, Tennessee, in this ball game. The next key for Tennessee must win on third downs. For the Tennessee offense, converting on third downs and forcing Alabama, when Alabama's on offense, into third and long will be absolutely essential in this ball game. So Tennessee, you need to convert on third downs, keep that offense on the field. Conversely, you want to force Alabama into third and longs and force them to be more one-dimensional and really attack that offensive line for Alabama with some unique blitz combinations, forcing that ball to come out of Milroy's hands a little bit quicker and getting Alabama off the field. Final key for Tennessee. Tennessee must control the clock. Keeping that Alabama offense off the field with long drives will help Tennessee stay connected in this ball game. And folks, we saw that last weekend with South Carolina. South Carolina was able to do just what I'm describing here. And that's how South Carolina was able to stay in that game in all 4 quarters. This matchup pits an Alabama explosive offense versus an elite Tennessee defense. While this Tennessee offense will face a strong and balanced Alabama defense. Alabama has the edge in experience and coaching, but Tennessee could disrupt their rhythm with key defensive stops in this ball game. Folks, I think we're going to be in store for something interesting in this ball game. As you know, we like interesting. I'm going to go ahead and give out some other games that we're looking to this weekend. And there was a couple of games that I kind of circled this weekend because they are interesting. And I'm going to look to a game. Well, I'm going to look at 2 games here. Sam Houston versus Western Kentucky. I'm just going to give a quick thought in this ball game. I think this is a fairly balanced matchup. The Sam Houston's running game and third down efficiency gives them a slight advantage over Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky can stay competitive if they're able to establish their passing attack, improve on their third down performance. However, if Sam Houston is able to control the clock and exploit that Western Kentucky weakness on defense, they have a strong chance of winning that ball game coming up. Another contest that I'm going to be keeping my eyes on, Toledo versus Northern Illinois. That game is very important in the MAC conference. And just some quick thoughts on that ball game. Northern Illinois' strong defense, particularly on third down, gives them a slight edge in this matchup. Toledo's offense will need to find a way to convert in these key situations, but Northern Illinois' rushing attack and defensive performance gives them the tools to control this game. If Toledo's passing game can make an impact, the game will be close. Northern Illinois has the advantage if they play to their strengths on the ground and on defense. Another game I'm keeping an eye on. I want to see this South Carolina-Oklahoma contest. Both teams coming off of heartbreaking losses. Both teams have strong defenses. But Oklahoma's edge with having that strong defense going to give a slight advantage to Oklahoma. But South Carolina's best chance will be to lean on their defense and their run game to control tempo. If Oklahoma can find any efficiency in this ball game, might provide the difference in a close matchup. And the final, well, you know what? My good friend Matlock asked me to look at this game, so I'm going to give it to him. The Kansas State Wildcats heading up to West Virginia. Mountain Mama, let's take me home. The Mountaineers in this ball game. Looking at this explosive offense for West Virginia, coming in averaging 37 points per game, going up against a K-State defense that is only allowing 16 points per game. West Virginia offense is explosive, but they will face a tough challenge in this K-State defense that has been excellent in limiting points in this ball game. West Virginia has been balanced through the air and on the ground. I think they'll have more success throwing the ball instead of running it, as Kansas State is only allowing 108 yards rushing on the ground. We know that West Virginia likes to run the ball, 234 yards. I don't think they're going to have that same success running the ball against this K-State defense. So if West Virginia is going to win, it's going to be through the air. Let's take a look at K-State. K-State averaging 29 points per game, while West Virginia only allowing 19 points per game. This K-State offense will be tested against a solid defense, but they're still capable of scoring. And when I say scoring, I do mean by that ground game. K-State excels in the ground game, 249 yards per game on the ground. They're going to go up against their stiffest test so far this season as West Virginia, only allowing 115 yards per game on the ground. K-State does have a clear advantage in the run game, but it should try to get something through the air so they can force West Virginia to worry about both phases of the ball game. So, final thoughts for you, Matlock, and everybody that's listening. Kansas State advantage in the rushing game, and their tough defense gives them a slight edge in this matchup. But West Virginia's explosive offense and their ability to convert on third downs makes them dangerous. This game could come down to whether K-State can control the pace through their running game and whether West Virginia can create enough big plays to stay competitive. If West Virginia can convert on third downs, keep the K-State offense off the field, they have an excellent chance of pulling off the upset at home there in Morgantown. And another game that we find interesting, and folks, we love interesting, the Auburn Tigers versus the Missouri Tigers. And when you look at the point spread, you're going to think that I'm out of my mind. But when you hear the quick breakdown in this ball game, You may not think I'm as crazy as I sound. Auburn's strength lies in their running game. Auburn Tigers come in averaging 185 yards per game on the ground. The Missouri Tigers defense gives up 135 yards per game on the ground. Auburn Tigers, they convert third downs at a 42% clip. Missouri's only allowing their opponents to convert on 25%. This is a crucial area where Missouri's defense has a clear advantage, but Auburn will need to improve on the third down percentage to sustain drives. This is critical. Now, the Missouri rushing attack has been more than formidable early on in the season, averaging 223 yards rushing this season. The Auburn defense is only allowing 138 on the ground. Now, Missouri's run game could be the key in wearing down that Auburn defense, especially if Missouri is able to convert at their impressive 52% on third down. Auburn's defense only allowing opponents to convert on 38%. Folks, this game is going to come down to Missouri being able to leverage the run game. And if Auburn is able to keep that Missouri offense off the field, not commit turnovers, that will be a key for Auburn. Now, look, Missouri has clear advantages on both sides of the ball. Their offense, especially the run game, has been very productive, while their defense is strong on third downs and limiting opponents' scoring opportunities. Auburn will need to play nearly a perfect game, relying heavy on their rushing attack and hoping for a few defensive stops in this ball game. I'm not saying that Auburn will win the game. I'm just saying this game could be interesting, and that's why we like interesting. I forgot to give this out a moment ago, but it is very important. Tennessee has suffered a major loss on the defensive side of the ball, as their star linebacker, Keon Peely, will miss the rest of the season with a torn ACL. Folks, that was about as heartbreaking of news that we got this year, as Peely is leading the Vols in tackles on the season. And really, folks, he is the heart and soul of that Tennessee front seven. James Pierce Jr. has not been the dominating disruptive force as we thought he would be this season. Only 2 sacks on the season. Has 19 tackles, but he's not getting into the backfield like we expected him to do so this year. Now, let's get to our final thoughts on the show here. And that is, who needs to show me something? Well, we just talked about it in the breakdown. This is separation/elimination Saturday. Georgia, Alabama, LSU in the Southeastern Conference. You need to show me something. In the Atlantic Coast Conference, Louisville, you have an opportunity to get back into this race here for the ACC championship game. Show me something against Miami and come away with the win at home. In the Big 12, oh boy, do we have some teams that absolutely need to show us something. Texas Tech, you're in a 3-way tie right now with Iowa State and BYU at the top of the Big 12 conference standings. Sitting right behind you, though, is several teams including Kansas State, Arizona State, Cincinnati, Colorado, and West Virginia, just with one loss in conference right now. So a log jam in the Big 12. And then finally, as we head up to the Big 10, who needs to show me something? It is America's team in the Indiana Hoosiers. We know that schedule hasn't been the toughest so far in the season, but getting a win over Nebraska will help keep pace with Oregon and Penn State, as they are the only two other teams that are undefeated in the Big Ten Conference. If somehow Indiana is able to get past Nebraska in this contest, they could set up a very important game here in a couple of weeks against Ohio State. So, America's team, keep winning. And ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude our show. And on behalf of my fantastic team, our talented and lovely hosts, Jessica and Summer, our senior handicapping analyst, Billy, always doing a fantastic job of setting the lines. This is Kenneth, senior analyst for the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, asking you to please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, as well as giving us a follow on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Want to wish everyone a great weekend, as we have another great slate of games coming up this weekend. Enjoy week 8. We have games all week long, so stay tuned and let's have a fantastic week. And as always, God bless everybody.